Randy Williams had one rule: no surprises. As a black single father, he couldn't afford them. One misunderstanding, one wrong move, and everything he'd built could crumble. So when he stepped into his apartment that Friday evening and heard water running in his bathroom, his blood turned to ice. No one had a key. No one should be here. His hand found the baseball bat by the door. His phone was ready to dial 911, but as steam crept under the bathroom door, Randy faced a terrifying truth. Whoever stepped out next would either destroy his life or change it forever. The bathroom door stood between Randy and whatever waited on the other side. He'd spent 34 years learning how to read situations, how to calculate risk in seconds. As a black man in America, that skill wasn't optional. It was survival. His thumb hovered over the emergency call button. One tap and police would be here in minutes. But Randy had seen too many stories end badly when officers arrived to find a black man standing over someone in distress. The narrative could twist against him before he even opened his mouth. So he made a different choice. "I know you're in there," he called out, keeping his voice steady. "I've already called the police. Come out slowly." The water shut off. A woman's scream pierced through the door, followed by frantic movement. Randy tightened his grip on the bat. Every muscle coiled. The door flew open. Steam poured out first, then a figure wrapped in his towel. A woman with dark, wet hair plastered to her face, mascara running down her cheeks, eyes wide with pure terror. "Please don't hurt me." She pressed herself against the doorframe, hands raised. "I swear I'm not. I didn't." Randy didn't lower the bat. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" "I live here." The words tumbled out in a rush. "Apartment 4A. I just moved in 3 days ago. I thought this was—" Her eyes darted around the bathroom, taking in the navy blue towels, the men's razor by the sink, the complete absence of anything belonging to her. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Oh my God. Oh my God. This isn't my apartment. She started shaking so violently that Randy worried she might collapse. "This is 4B, he said slowly. 4B. She repeated it like a death sentence. "The doors look exactly the same. I just got off a 6-hour flight from Los Angeles and I was so tired and the key worked and I didn't even look at the number." And wait, Rye's brow furrowed. "Your key worked on my door." The woman fumbled with her keychain. Still clutching the towel with her other hand, she held up a silver key. "The building manager gave me this. He said the previous tenant left it." Randy understood immediately. This building was old, built in the 1970s. Half the locks probably shared the same pattern. He'd meant to get his changed when he moved in 2 months ago, but never got around to it. For the first time. He lowered the bat slightly. The woman was still trembling, mascara tears streaking her face. She looked like she'd been through a war. Not a shower. Her whole body radiated exhaustion, the kind that came from more than just a long flight. "I didn't call the police," Randy admitted. Her head snapped up. "What I said I did, but I didn't." He set the bat against the wall. "I figured I'd assess the situation first." Something flickered across her face. Confusion, then understanding, then something that looked almost like gratitude. You didn't call because she didn't finish the sentence. But they both knew what she meant. Randy had learned long ago that some conversations didn't need words. "I'm Elena," she said quietly. "Elena Vasquez. I'm so sorry. I can't believe God. You must think I'm insane. I think you're exhausted." Randy studied her for a moment. She wasn't a threat. She was a tired woman who'd made an honest mistake. One that could have ended very differently if he'd reacted the way most people expected him to. "When did you last eat?" Elena blinked at the unexpected question. "I don't. On the plane? Maybe. There was a layover in Denver and I couldn't find anything open. That was at least 12 hours ago." Randy made a decision he couldn't quite explain to himself. "Get dressed. I'll make you something to eat." Then I'll walk you to your actual apartment. You don't have to. I know. Elena clutched her towel tighter. She'd grabbed her clothes from what she thought was her bathroom floor, a crumpled dress and underwear that now sat in a wet pile by the tub. She looked so lost, so completely undone that something in Rye's chest tightened. He stepped back to give her space. Take your time. Kitchen's down the hall. 20 minutes later, Elena sat at Rye's small kitchen table wearing her wrinkled dress, her wet hair twisted into a messy bun. She hadn't touched the scrambled eggs he'd placed in front of her. Eat, Randy said from across the table. You look like you're about to pass out. She picked up the fork like it weighed 20 palmos. The first bite seemed to unlock something in her, and suddenly she was eating like she hadn't seen food in days. Randy watched her in silence. He should be angry. He should be demanding answers, calling the building manager, filing some kind of report. Instead, he found himself noticing the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands still shook slightly, the vulnerable curve of her shoulders. Why did you move here? He asked. Elena looked up, a bit of egg still on her fork. Job. I'm a landscape architect. I just got hired by a firm downtown. It's a big opportunity. I've been freelancing in LA for years. But this is... She trailed off, searching for words. This is the kind of position I've been working toward my whole career. That's a long way to come for a job. That's a long way to come for anything. Elena set down her fork. I sold my apartment, ended a relationship, said goodbye to everyone I knew. And then I got here and my furniture won't arrive until next week. And the apartment is empty. And I was so tired I walked into the wrong home and took a shower in a stranger's bathroom. A sound escaped her half-laugh, half-sob. This is not how I imagined starting over. Randy understood that feeling more than she knew. 3 years ago, he'd signed divorce papers and watched his whole life restructure itself around a custody agreement and a 2-bedroom apartment he could barely afford. Starting over wasn't glamorous. It was eating cereal at midnight in an empty kitchen, wondering if you'd made the right choice. Tomorrow. Saturday, Randy said. My daughter comes in the morning. I have her on weekends and some weekdays split custody with my ex-wife. Elena's eyes softened. How old is she? 6. Her name's Sophie. Just saying her name made something warm bloom in Rye's chest. She's the best thing I've ever done. You're a single dad. Have been for 3 years now. Elena studied him with new eyes. Randy could see her recalculating, adjusting whatever assumptions she'd made. A black man alone in an apartment, baseball bat in hand. She'd probably expected anger-aggression threat. Instead, she'd gotten scrambled eggs and conversation. I should go, she said, standing. I've invaded your home enough for one night. Randy walked her to the door. The hallway outside was quiet, the building settling into its nighttime rhythms. Elena's apartment was directly across the hall 4A, just like she'd said. The doors really did look identical. She turned to face him, one hand on her doorframe. Thank you for not reacting the way most people would have. Randy shrugged. Most people don't have to think about what happens when they react. The words hung between them heavy with meaning. Elena held his gaze for a long moment, and Randy saw something shift in her expression. Recognition, maybe understanding. I owe you one. Randy. She said his name like she was committing it to memory. Apartment 4B? I won't forget. Get some sleep. Elena, tomorrow's a new day. She smiled. Tired, but genuine, and disappeared into her apartment. Randy heard the lock click behind her. He stood in the hallway for a moment longer, processing everything that had just happened. An hour ago. He'd been ready to defend his home against an intruder. Now he was thinking about the way Elena's voice sounded when she said his name. The vulnerability in her eyes when she talked about starting over. Dangerous thoughts. He pushed them away. Tomorrow. Sophie would arrive and his world would shrink back to what mattered: his daughter, his work, his carefully constructed life. There was no room for complications for strangers who stumbled through the wrong door and stirred up feelings he'd buried years ago. Randy went back inside, locked the door behind him, and tried not to notice that his apartment felt emptier than it had before. The next morning, Randy woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window and the lingering scent of scrambled eggs in his kitchen. For a moment, he lay still, replaying the events of the previous night. It already felt like something he might have imagined. But when he stepped into the hallway to take out the trash, Elena's door opened at the exact same moment. They both froze. "Good morning," Elena said. She looked different in daylight, rested her dark hair, now dry and falling in waves around her shoulders. She wore jeans and a simple white blouse, and she was holding a plate covered in aluminum foil. "Morning." Randy shifted the trash bag to his other hand. "I made banana bread." Elena thrust the plate toward him. "It's the only thing I could make with what I had. The grocery store doesn't open until 900 and I couldn't sleep, so I just baked." She shook her head at herself. "I'm rambling. I'm sorry. I just wanted to thank you properly for last night." Randy accepted the plate. The bread was still warm. "You didn't have to do this." "I know, but I wanted to." Elena tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Is your daughter coming today in about an hour?" "Her mom drops her off at 10:00. I'll let you get ready then." Elena started to retreat into her apartment, then stopped. "Randy, I meant what I said last night about owing you one. If you ever need anything, a cup of sugar, someone to water your plants, whatever, I'm right across the hall." She disappeared before he could respond. Randy stood there holding the banana bread, wondering why such a simple interaction left him feeling so unsettled. Sophie arrived at 10:15, bursting through the door like a small hurricane. She wrapped her arms around Rye's legs and squeezed with all the strength her 6-year-old body could muster. "Daddy, I missed you so much." Randy scooped her up, pressing his face into her curly hair. "I missed you too, baby girl." "How was your week?" "Good. Mommy took me to get ice cream and I got 2 scoops behind Sophie." Keisha stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. She was a beautiful woman, always had been, but the warmth had left her eyes years ago, replaced by a permanent weariness whenever she looked at Randy. "She needs to be in bed by 8, Keisha said. "And don't let her eat too much sugar. She's been hyper all week." "I know the routine." Keisha's gaze swept the apartment, looking for something to criticize. It was a habit she'd developed during their marriage and never quite shook. "Is that banana bread?" Randy glanced at the plate on his counter. "A neighbor made it." "Since when do you have neighbors who bake for you since someone new moved in across the hall?" Keisha's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't press further. "I'll pick her up Sunday at 6:30. Don't be late." After she left, Randy let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. 3 years of co-parenting and every interaction with Keisha still felt like walking through a minefield. "Daddy, can we go to the park?" Sophie tugged at his shirt. "After lunch." "Sweetheart, first, let's see what you want to do this morning." The weekend passed in a blur of cartoons, coloring books, and trips to the playground. Randy treasured every moment with Sophie, storing them up like provisions for the days when his apartment would be empty again. On Sunday afternoon, as they walked back from getting ice cream, they ran into Elena in the hallway. She was carrying grocery bags, struggling to find her keys. "Need help?" Randy asked. Elena looked up, relief flooding her face. "Please, I think I bought half the store." While Randy held her bags, Sophie studied Elena with unabashed curiosity. "Who are you?" Elena crouched down to Sophie's eye level. "I'm Elena. I live right there." She pointed to apartment 4A. "You must be Sophie. Your dad told me about you." Sophie's eyes widened. "He did. What did he say?" "He said, 'You're the best thing that ever happened to him.'" Sophie beamed, then turned to Randy. "Daddy, I like her. She's pretty." Randy felt heat creep up his neck. "Sophie, that's not..." But Elena was laughing a genuine musical sound. "Thank you. Sophie, I think you're pretty. Too. I love your hair." Sophie touched her curls self-consciously. "Sophie, Mommy says it's hard to manage. Hard to manage just means it has a mind of its own. That's a good thing. It means you're special." Something shifted in Rye's chest as he watched Elena interact with his daughter. There was no awkwardness, no forced cheerfulness. Elena spoke to Sophie like she was a real person, not just a child to be patronized. Dangerous, he reminded himself. This is dangerous. Over the next 2 weeks. Randy found himself running into Elena constantly in the elevator at the mailboxes in the basement laundry room. Each encounter was brief, but left him thinking about her long after they parted. One evening, Elena knocked on his door holding a broken wooden shelf. "I tried to install this myself," she admitted, "but I think I made it worse. You're a carpenter, right? You mentioned something about custom furniture." Randy examined the shelf. "You stripped the screws and this bracket is upside down. Is that bad?" "It's fixable." He ended up spending 2 hours in Elena's apartment, not just fixing the shelf, but helping her arrange the furniture that had finally arrived. Her place was slowly transforming from an empty box into something warm and lived in. She had good taste, clean lines, natural materials, plants everywhere. "You really know wood," Elena said, watching him work. "I can tell by the way you touch it, like you are listening to it." Randy ran his hand along the grain of her bookshelf. "My grandfather was a carpenter, taught me everything I know. He used to say that every piece of wood has a story. You just have to be patient enough to hear it. That's beautiful." Elena sat cross-legged on her floor, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. "I feel that way about landscapes. Every space has potential. You just have to see what it wants to become." They talked for hours that night. Elena told him about her dream of designing public park spaces where children from every neighborhood could play together, where nature could heal the wounds that cities inflicted. Randy found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone, how his marriage had crumbled under the weight of unspoken expectations, how being a black father meant constantly proving himself worthy of his own child. "Keisha never trusted me to get it right," he admitted. "No matter what I did, she was always waiting for me to fail." Elena listened without judgment. "That must have been exhausting." It is." He stared at his hands. "Sometimes I wonder if she was right. If I'm just fooling myself thinking I can give Sophie everything she needs." "Randy," Elena's voice was firm, "I've seen you with your daughter. That little girl adores you. And more importantly, you adore her. That's not something you can fake." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air between them felt charged with something neither of them was ready to name. Randy left shortly after, but he couldn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time someone had looked at him the way Elena did, like he was worth believing in. The 3rd week changed everything. They'd fallen into a routine by then. Dinners at her place or his walks through the neighborhood after work. Long conversations that stretched into the early hours. Randy hadn't felt this connected to someone since before his marriage fell apart. One Thursday evening, Elena was quieter than usual. They were sitting on her small balcony watching the sun set over the city when she finally spoke. "I got some news today." Randy turned to look at her. "Good news or bad news, I don't know yet." Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "Remember how I told you about the big project my firm was hoping to land, the community park redesign? The one you said could change the whole neighborhood? That one, we got it and they want me to lead it." Rye's face broke into a genuine smile. "Elena, that's amazing. Why aren't you celebrating because it's in Seattle?" The word hung in the air like a verdict. "Seattle," Randy repeated. "On the other side of the country." Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. "They want me to relocate. The project will take at least 2 years, and they need someone on the ground full-time." Randy felt something cold settle in his stomach. When do they need an answer? 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 14 days to decide whether this thing growing between them had a future or was already dead on arrival. This is your dream, Randy said carefully. The kind of opportunity you moved across the country for. I know. So, what's the problem? Elena finally looked at him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. The problem is that, 3 weeks ago, I didn't have a reason to stay. Now I'm not so sure. Neither of them slept well that night. The 4th week brought a different kind of storm. Randy was giving Sophie a bath when his phone rang. Keisha's name flashed on the screen. Daddy. Can I have more bubbles? Sophie asked. 1 second. Baby. Randy answered the phone. Hello. Who is Elena? Keisha's voice was ice. Rye's grip tightened. What? Sophie told me all about your new friend. The pretty lady across the hall who has dinner with you and helps with homework and apparently knows my daughter better than I do. Say, Keisha. It's not. How long have you been seeing her? How long have you been letting a stranger into my daughter's life without telling me she's not a stranger? She's my neighbor, and Sophie's met her a few times, that's all. That's all? Keisha's laugh was sharp. Randy, you've been divorced for 3 years, and in all that time, you've never once introduced Sophie to a woman. Now, suddenly, there's someone having dinner at your apartment, and I'm supposed to believe it's nothing. Randy stepped into the hallway, lowering his voice so Sophie wouldn't hear. What I do in my personal life is my business, not when it affects my daughter. Our daughter. And nothing is affecting her. She's happy, she's healthy, and she's loved. That should be enough for you. But Keisha wasn't finished. I'm going to be watching Randy. If I think for 1 second that this woman is a bad influence on Sophie, I'll take you back to court so fast your head will spin. You understand me? The line went dead. Randy stood in the hallway, phone clutched in his hand, feeling the walls close in around him. This was exactly what he'd been afraid of. One wrong move, and everything he'd built could be taken away. The following Wednesday, on one of Rye's weekday evenings without Sophie. He and Elena went to a hardware store to pick out supplies for a small herb garden she wanted to start on her balcony. They were comparing soil types when Randy noticed an older white woman watching them from the end of the aisle. The woman's gaze moved from Elena to Randy, then back to Elena, her lips pursed in unmistakable disapproval. She whispered something to her husband, who glanced their way before quickly looking down at his shopping list. Elena noticed, too. She reached for Rye's hand. He pulled away. It wasn't conscious, just instinct. Born from years of learning to make himself smaller, less threatening, less visible. But the hurt that flashed across Elena's face made him wish he could take it back. They drove home in silence. It wasn't until they were standing in the hallway between their apartments that Elena spoke. You pulled away from me. Elena, I'm not angry. I'm just trying to understand. Randy leaned against his door, suddenly exhausted. Do you know what it's like being watched all the time? Having people assume the worst about you before you even open your mouth? He shook his head. I've spent my whole life being careful, not drawing attention, making sure no one has a reason to see me as a threat. But I'm not asking you to be a threat. I'm asking you to hold my hand. And what happens when someone calls the police because they don't like the way I look at you? What happens when Keisha finds out and decides I'm unfit to raise my own daughter? His voice cracked. I can't afford to be careless. Elena, I can't afford to be brave. Elena's eyes glistened. So, what are you saying, that we just pretend this isn't happening? I don't know what I'm saying. Rye's shoulders sagged. I just know that I can't lose Sophie. And right now, it feels like everything I do could take her away from me. They stood there in the hallway, the distance between them feeling like miles. I have to give my answer about Seattle soon, Elena said quietly. And I don't know what to do, because staying feels impossible. but leaving feels worse. Before Randy could respond, she was gone, her door closing softly behind her. The final blow came 3 days later. Keisha demanded a meeting at a coffee shop neutral ground. She sat across from Randy with her lawyer's business card already on the table. "I've been thinking about our custody arrangement," she said. "And I've decided that if you continue this relationship, I'm going to petition for full custody." Randy felt the blood drain from his face. "You can't do that. I can do whatever I think is best for my daughter." "She's my daughter, too." "Then act like it." Keisha leaned forward. "I'm not saying you can never date anyone. I'm saying that you need to be more careful about who you bring into Sophie's life. This woman, Elena. She's only been here a month. You don't know anything about her. I know enough. Do you know if she's planning to stay? Do you know if she's going to be here in 6 months or if she's going to break Sophie's heart when she decides to leave?" Randy had no answer for that because the truth was, he didn't know. Elena had a decision to make and he had no right to make it for her. That night after Sophie had fallen asleep in her room, Elena knocked on his door. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "I got an email from my boss," she said quietly, mindful of the sleeping child. "They need my answer in 48 hours. Randy let her in, and they sat on his couch, keeping their voices low. The space between them felt heavy with everything unspoken. "What do you want me to do?" Elena finally asked. "Just tell me and I'll do it." Randy wanted to tell her to stay. He wanted to promise her that they could figure it out together, that love was worth fighting for, that his feelings for her were real and deep and terrifying. But then he thought about Sophie sleeping in the next room, about Keisha's threats, about every time he dared to hope for something and watched it crumble. "I can't tell you to give up your dream," he said, "and I don't know if I can give you what you need. I don't know if I'm allowed to." Elena's face crumpled. "You're allowed to want things for yourself. Randy, you're allowed to be happy." "Am I?" The question came out broken. "Because my whole life I've been told to be careful, to not ask for too much, to be grateful for what I have and not reach for anything more. That's not living. That's just surviving. Surviving is all I know how to do." Elena stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Then I feel sorry for you because you have so much love to give and you're too afraid to let anyone receive it." She left without looking back. Randy sat alone in the dark, surrounded by silence, wondering if she was right, wondering if the walls he'd built to protect himself had become a prison instead. He thought about Sophie's smile, about Elena's laugh, about the life he could have if he was brave enough to reach for it. But bravery had never been safe, and safety was all he had left. Randy didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, watching shadows crawl across the ceiling, replaying Elena's words over and over. "You have so much love to give, and you're too afraid to let anyone receive it." She was right. He knew she was right. But knowing something and acting on it were two different things. The next morning, Sophie found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "Daddy?" She climbed into his lap, her small hands cupping his face. "Why do you look so sad?" Randy tried to smile, but it wouldn't come. "I'm just thinking." "Baby girl, about what?" He looked into his daughter's eyes. Keisha's eyes, but softer somehow, still full of the trust that life hadn't beaten out of her yet about grown-up stuff. Sophie considered this. "Is it about Miss Elena?" The question hit him like a punch to the chest. "Why would you ask that?" "Because I haven't seen her in a long time, and you always smiled when she was around." Sophie tilted her head. "Did she go away?" Randy swallowed hard. "She might have to for her job, but she lives right there." Sophie pointed toward the door toward apartment 4A across the hall. "Why can't she just stay?" It was such a simple question. Why couldn't she just stay? Why did everything have to be so complicated? Sometimes, Randy said slowly, people have dreams that take them far away, and we have to let them go, even if it hurts. Sophie's lower lip trembled. But I don't want her to go. I like her. Daddy, she makes you happy. Randy held his daughter close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. When had Sophie become so perceptive? When had she started seeing things that he was too afraid to admit to himself? Do you like her? Sophie asked quietly. Like really like her? The truth rose up in Rye's throat, impossible to swallow back down. Yeah, baby, I really like her. Then why are you letting her leave? Randy had no answer. Because I'm scared. Because I've been taught that wanting things only leads to losing them. Because every time I've reached for happiness, someone has told me I don't deserve it. But looking at Sophie's face, he realized something. His daughter was watching him, learning from him. If he spent his life hiding from love, what lesson was he teaching her that afternoon? While Sophie was absorbed in her coloring books at the kitchen table, Randy picked up his phone and called Keisha. She answered on the third ring, her voice immediately suspicious. What do you want? I want to talk. Really talk. Not argue. Not threaten. Just talk. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Keisha said, I'm listening. Randy took a deep breath. I've spent 3 years trying to prove to you that I'm a good father. 3 years walking on eggshells, terrified that one wrong move would give you a reason to take Sophie away from me. And I'm tired. Keisha, I'm tired of living in fear. Randy, let me finish. His voice was steady now, stronger than it had been in years. I love our daughter more than anything in this world. I would never do anything to hurt her. But I'm also a person. I have feelings, I have needs, and I deserve to be happy. Kesha was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, some of the ice had melted from her voice. I know you love Sophie. I've never doubted that. Then why do you make me feel like I'm always one mistake away from losing her? The question hung in the air. Randy heard Keisha take a shaky breath. Because I'm scared. Too, she admitted. When we got divorced, I didn't know how to share her. I didn't know how to trust that you could do this without me. So, I tried to control everything. And maybe that wasn't fair to you. It was the closest thing to an apology Randy had ever heard from her. Elena is a good person, he said. She's kind to Sophie. She makes me want to be better. And if you want to take me to court over that, then go ahead. But I'm not going to hide anymore. I'm not going to pretend that I don't deserve love just because it makes you uncomfortable. Keisha was silent for so long that Randy thought she might have hung up. Then quietly, I'm not going to take you to court. Randy. Relief flooded through him, but he kept his voice steady. Thank you. Just be careful with her, with both of them. Sophie gets attached easily. I don't want her heartbroken. Neither do I. After he hung up, Randy sat very still, letting the weight of the conversation settle over him. For the first time in 3 years, he felt like he could breathe. But there was still one more conversation he needed to have. He walked to the front door and opened it wide, making sure he could see Sophie at the kitchen table from the hallway. Then he crossed to Elena's apartment and knocked. The door swung open and Elena stood there in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her eyes were red-rimmed and there were boxes stacked behind her. Randy. Her voice was flat, defeated. I'm kind of in the middle of packing. His heart dropped. So, you're going to Seattle. What choice do I have? You made it pretty clear that there's no future here. Randy looked at the boxes, at the bare walls where her plants used to hang, at the empty spaces where her furniture had already been moved. She was really leaving, in a matter of hours. She would be gone and he would go back to his quiet apartment, his careful life, his lonely existence, unless he did something about it. "I was wrong," he said. Elena's hand tightened on the doorframe. "What I was wrong about everything." Randy stepped closer, his voice thick with emotion. "I've spent my whole life being careful, playing it safe, telling myself that I didn't deserve good things because wanting them only led to pain. But you know what? That's not living. That's just existing." Elena's eyes glistened with fresh tears. "Randy, don't do this if you're just going to. I'm not going to push you away again. I'm not going to let fear win." He reached out and took her hand, holding it firmly this time. "I don't know how this works. I don't know if we can figure out the distance thing or the custody thing or any of the million obstacles in front of us. But I know that I want to try because you make me want to be brave, and I haven't wanted that in a very long time." Elena stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "I called my boss this morning." Rye's breath caught, and I told them I couldn't relocate permanently. I asked if there was another way, working remotely, flying out for site visits, managing the project from here. A small smile broke through her tears. They said it would be harder, less money, more travel, but they said yes. The words didn't register at first. "You're not leaving." "I'm leaving," Elena said, "but I'm coming back every time." She squeezed his hand. "Because for the first time in my life, I have a reason to come home." Before Randy could respond, a small voice called out from the apartment across the hall. "Daddy, where did you go?" They both turned to see Sophie standing in Rye's doorway, clutching a crayon in one hand. "I'm right here, baby girl." Randy waved her over. "Come say hi to Miss Elena." Sophie's face lit up as she ran across the hall. "Miss Elena, are you staying? Please say you're staying." Elena knelt down, bringing herself to Sophie's level. "I have to go away sometimes for work, but I'm going to come back every single time. Is that okay?" Sophie considered this with the serious expression only a 6-year-old could manage. Then she nodded. "Okay, but you have to promise." "I promise." Sophie grabbed Elena's hand in one of hers and Rye's hand in the other. "Come on," she said, tugging them toward apartment 4B. "I was coloring and I need help with the sky. Miss Elena, do you know how to make blue?" Elena laughed, a real laugh full of joy and relief. "I think I can figure it out." Randy met Elena's eyes over his daughter's head. She was smiling, really smiling for the first time in days. He thought about that night 4 weeks ago when he'd stood in this same hallway with a baseball bat, terrified of what he might find behind his bathroom door. He'd been so sure that whoever stepped out would destroy his life. He'd been wrong. The woman who stepped out of that bathroom hadn't come to destroy anything. She'd come to build something new, something he'd stopped music believing was possible. As Sophie pulled them both into the apartment, Randy realized that this was what bravery felt like. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to reach for something anyway. The door closed behind them, and inside the sound of laughter filled the space that had been empty for far too